There's an old saying amongst collectors that records are made to be played. Is that still the case? Is it crazy to buy a record with no intention of ever opening it? We will discuss on this episode, Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl. If you're local to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we'd love it if you shop with us. Or if you're inside the United States, you can always visit our website at ntxvinyl.com and support what we do there for any new releases, pre-orders, back in stock vinyl. Today we're going to talk about a topic that comes up quite often, and that is the idea of keeping records sealed or not. Seems kind of crazy. I'm with you. I am one of those people who pretty much live by the idea that records are made to be played. But I will say there's a big caveat to that, because this is not the vinyl record industry of 1960 or 70 or 80. It's simply changed, just like everything else in our life. You know, we use the phone differently, we use our car differently, we use we go to the grocery store or not differently. Everything in our life has evolved and changed, and to think that the vinyl record industry, just because the record itself is kind of the same artifact from a tangible aspect, that doesn't mean it's the same industry, right? And I think that's a big thing to preface here as I get into this conversation, because people collect records these days for many different reasons, not just to listen to them, believe it or not. There are certainly people who do. I happen to be one of those. I love my record collection. I listen to records every day, but there's a lot of people who buy records who don't even own turntables. That sounds crazy to me. May sound crazy to you, or maybe you're one of those people. But that's the reality of this, is that the industry has changed, and there's a reason for that. People buy records these days and maybe don't open them and play them because they can listen to the music in other ways. They can stream it. They can pull it up on YouTube. Is it the same? That's debatable. A lot of people would say no. I would agree with that. But the reality is you can access the music without having to open the record. Whereas if you go back to, 60s, 70s, 80s, the heyday of the initial period when vinyl was the primary physical format, the reason why you opened every record is because you wanted to hear the damn music. Well, you can hear the music without opening it these days. So that plays into this a lot, right? So let's talk about new records. There are definitely collectors these days. There are consumers these days who are buying records and not opening them, or questioning whether they should open them. Maybe they do have a turntable, but they're like, man, maybe I should keep this sealed because it's going to go up in value. There's definitely that collector's mentality that a record, or anything for that matter, if you keep it pristine, if you keep it sealed, it will go up in value. So why would you want to tarnish that? Again, if you can pull it up on your phone and play it, and you don't care about the fidelity of the audio anyways, maybe you don't have a great turntable, so streaming it's going to sound just the same on your $100 turntable, versus streaming, right? So there's definitely a conversation there. But the fact is, consumers these days, record collectors, record buyers, whatever you want to call them, they collect for a lot of different reasons, and that wasn't the case in the old school industry. The old school industry was you bought a record because you wanted to hear the music. That was it. You wanted to support the band. You wanted to hear the music. That was it. It was kind of a very simple transaction. These days, people buy records to put them on the wall because they look cool. I agree. I love the artwork on albums. It's big. They buy them because, again, they want to support the artist. They think they're making an investment. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, of something that's going to, increase in value over time. They buy records because they like the color of them. If it's a colored vinyl, there's something to be said for that. They buy them because they're limited. Maybe there's not that many of them. Again, ties back to the investment. Again, a lot of different reasons why people collect. I'm not saying any of those reasons are good or bad. But back to the topic. Are records made to be played? These days, I think it's kind of split. I think if I'm a record label, if I'm thinking about who's making the records these days, record labels, whether it be major labels, independent labels, whatever, are they making them to be played? I think in most cases they are. But I think there is definitely a trend in the vinyl industry, and this is a trend that's been happening over many years, not anything brand new, that they're making them more limited, more collectible, to create more FOMO, fear of missing out, to sell more, right? That is definitely a thing. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's debatable. That's a different video. But the reality is that all plays into the different ways that people are collecting, because you might be the type of consumer where you walk into a record store or you're shopping online, whatever it may be, and you see an album and whatever, it's $30 for an album. And you're like, I know a song or two. I kind of like it. I'd love to kind of check it out, but it's $30. And maybe I'll pass on that one for now. Now, if that record said limited to 500 copies on blue splatter vinyl with a signed insert, hand numbered, well, then you're like, man, I better pick this up now because I don't know if I'll ever see this again. There's only 500 of this specific kind, right? And then you buy it. So you buy that record. You spend your $30 because you think, you've got something. You're like, well, I kind of like the music, but I don't want to miss out on this. So I'm going to grab it now. Maybe it'll go up in value. And then you're like, oh, it's only 500. Should I even open this? Well, maybe I'll just stream it a little more first and see if I actually do really love the album before I open it and devalue it, right? It's interesting. It's really interesting to see. I see it all day long with collectors online. I see it with people who buy records from NTX Vinyl. It changes the mindset with the way these labels are positioning their products. And again, I'm not knocking anyone for it. I own a record label. Everything we do is limited edition. We only press a couple hundred of records. Now that's because that is where the demand is for our label. But for larger artists, whether it be major labels or larger indies, there's definitely levers that those companies are pulling to try and match the demand and the supply and the FOMO. That's the thing. Everyone always says it's all about supply and demand. I preach that all the time. It's all these days. It's about supply, demand, and FOMO, because all three of them play into they play off of each other, right? It's up to the label to figure out how many they should press to where they don't sell out immediately. They want it to stay around a little bit, but at the same time, they also don't want to be sitting on thousands of records of backstock. So all that goes into who's making these records. So if they're made to be played, well, if they're made to be played, let's just keep them all as cheap as possible and flood the market with them, and everyone can have every record they want. That's not the reality. That'll never happen. That was maybe the reality in the 60s, 70s, 80s, again, when vinyl was the predominant physical format because it was more of a utility. It's the only way you could hear the music. But people know that's not the case these days. People are buying records, and again, they have access to the music in a myriad of different ways in their pocket, free in most cases, so they don't have to open it. A lot of people will get a record and maybe don't have time to spin it right then, so they'll keep it. And then time goes by and it's on their shelf up here, and they're like, well, maybe I'll just keep it sealed. And then, then comes the question. They post a picture of it in a Facebook group or wherever it may be, and they say, should I open it? And that's when the comments flood in. Yes, records are made to be played. You should absolutely open it. Why do you even own it if you don't open it? And again, that's all fine, because those are people coming from a mentality that, and this includes myself, that records are made to be played. And why would you even spend your money on something if you're not going to enjoy it? That's not the world we live in. People are buying all kinds of things these days and not actually using them. A good analogy someone gave me recently was, why do people collect guitars that don't even play guitar? They don't even know how to play the instrument, but yet they love the look of them on their wall. They're beautiful. Now that's high end. You're talking about thousands of dollars for a guitar, a decent guitar, whether it's vintage or new or whatever. That pales in comparison. Records pale in comparison to that. But it's the same type of mentality. Why are you to knock someone? You walk into a man cave and there's a couple of really beautiful guitars that obviously cost a lot of money, and the guy doesn't even play guitar, but that's all right. He loves the way they look. It's like a piece of art. A record can be the same thing to a lot of people. So it's interesting how this has evolved. Buying habits, collecting habits, that's all evolved. That's all kind of new records, right? The other thing that comes up a lot, which is part of the genesis of this video, is because I have a bunch of not new records sealed, but old records sealed. So I've got stuff like an original, or at least an early 70s reissue of Led Zeppelin, sealed, sealed original with the hype sticker on it. Talking Heads, Little Creatures sealed. The Clash sealed, sealed Willie Nelson. Just really cool, iconic stuff, right? Double Fantasy, Prince, Kiss, Kate Bush, New Order. These are all sealed Grateful Dead, sealed vintage records, beautiful copies. U2, Wide Awake from Here. I mean, fantastic stuff. So if records are made to be played, should I just open all those up and play them? I mean, I've got copies of all of those already, so why should I open those? Maybe I'll sell them, I don't know. But these, to me, are almost a different topic because these are relics. Like, how many sealed, pristine copies of, Led Zeppelin 4 with the hype sticker still exist? Now, again, this isn't a first pressing or anything. This is, again, I think a mid-70s reissue. Either way, how many of these still exist? Very few, probably in this condition, sealed. I don't know, hundreds, maybe, if you can find them. This is why, these types of records is why now there are companies, and it's been talked about. I've done video on it. Lots of other, people in the vinyl community have discussed it. These are why auction houses and these companies are popping up where they're quote unquote slabbing records, which essentially means they're encapsulating them in plastic and they're giving them a grade, because these are history. These type of records, to me, I don't want to say it's okay to keep them sealed, but it makes more sense in my brain to keep them sealed because it's a relic. It's truly a piece of art. It's not something that is still being pressed. Like, that's the struggle, I think, for a lot of people and for me as well. Like, when you've got a collector, and I'm not going to name any specific artists or albums or whatever, but you've got collectors who are collecting different colors, different variants of all these different albums, and they're keeping them all sealed. The reality is like they're still pressing those albums. So it's not a relic because it's still readily available. It's still, so it doesn't, my brain can't understand that. But you're never going to get another, 1971 or whatever year that Led Zeppelin is. You're never going to get another one like that because it's from the past, right? And so those are a little bit of a different topic to me. And I do have some of those in my collection, just so I can't bring myself to open them. Sometimes I can't bring myself to sell them because I'm like, this is history, like, that type of thing. And then it becomes like, well, if you're not going to open it, why not put it in a plastic case so it retains the condition forever? Okay, I can kind of see that. Whether or not I need to get it graded and pay a company $50 to $100 to do that, that's kind of debatable. And that's, again, kind of a different topic. But are records only made to be played? That's the question. And I think these days, I think the answer is no. Records are made for a lot of different reasons. The music is, I hope, for most people, the primary reason. But the reality is that may not be the case. There are people collecting these just like baseball cards. There are people collecting these just like sneakers, just like comic books. Name anything anyone collects these days. Other forms of media, certainly, cassettes or CDs or VHS or video games. People collect all of those things. Nostalgia is real. People love going back and rediscovering things from their childhood and finding one that's never been touched, never been open. That's a pretty cool thing. And so records are definitely in that category, whether it be old, original, sealed records that have never been touched from back in the day. But then you got to say, okay, well, that record was brand new to someone when they bought it. This stack of these vintage records, people just start collecting right these days, and they're like, well, I'm just going to keep them sealed. And then in 50 years, mine will be a relic like that. Kind of makes sense. I can kind of see it. It's their money. They're investing it. Maybe they don't even own a turntable and they're just grabbing them to set them aside to hopefully have something really cool to look at in many, many, many years as something that's never been touched, never been, the condition's perfect, that type of thing. So I can kind of get it. I struggle with this, but there are definitely different points of view, and that's because there are people buying records for different reasons. So are they made to be played? The jury's out. I think it depends who you are, depends what your goal is with your record collection or your turntable or your records. And in the end, people are going to spend their money on whatever they want, and they're going to spend it in the ways they want, and then take whatever they buy and put it to use or not. And that's their decision. What do you think? Are records only made to be played, or these days are there different reasons why labels are making them and why people are buying them? Let me know in the comments. I would love to know your opinions on this. That's always the best part of these videos, is getting the feedback and getting the answers from you people in the vinyl community. Thank you so much for watching. This has been another episode of Talking About Records, and we will see you again next time.